Hello and welcome to the Inner Radiance Academy podcast.
I'm Vila Lucas. I am a certified healer and guide with Modern Mystery School International. And I'm here today with Julia Tiffin, who is a dear friend and colleague of mine, also a certified guide and healer and teacher with the Modern Mystery School of international renown. So Julia is someone who has bridged many different cultures and many different countries. And we're so excited to have you here today. So most recently, having come from South Africa and now living in London, recently traveled to Barcelona to do some teaching and more international travel and teaching on the way, I think. So welcome, Julia.
Welcome. Thank you so much. And just to give everyone a little heads up, in sync with today's talk, you might be hearing some cat purrs coming through my microphone as we start to talk about restoring the art of living. I think my cat is going to try to indicate that it's very important that part of that is having a cat. So I'm joking. But thank you so much for inviting me. You know that this topic is very close to both of our hearts. So we're going to have fun today. So thank you everyone for joining us today.
Yes. Okay. Well, let's dive right in. So the lost art of living. What in the world are we talking about here? So it's one thing to call the living an art. And then it's another thing to say that we've actually lost this art. So where do you want to start, Julia?
You know, I want to jump right into the most current thing right now that is coming to not an end but shifting, and that is really this pandemic. Because the one thing that I hear a lot of from people is because of the pandemic, I have ascertained what's really important to me. And
Yes.
people have started to make adjustments with how they are choosing to live their life and what's a priority. And
Absolutely. It's kind of amazing. Like, how else might that have happened? Where, like, on a global scale, we had like a whole opportunity to like examine our priorities more deeply.
I mean, never before have we been in a global community where we've had technology connecting every single country on this planet, and where we've gone through a global pandemic, where we've gone through a global shutdown, and everyone has been forced to stay at home and really look at what is important, as so much of the drumbeat of the world was taken away, literally.
I love that that's where, this underlying theme that you're laying in here about the rhythms, because I think that is so key. When we think of art, we think of it more as a visual art, but there's also this whole part about living that is active, and it's about action and movement. And with that is this rhythm. And like you said, with the pandemic, the entire rhythm of the planet shifted. And it was like all of a sudden, as individuals, we could tap in and tune in differently to say, like, what is a more natural or correct rhythm for me?
And I want to just jump into this thing, art, and then go back to what you were saying as well, because my background is art. And, I think so many people have been living by a drumbeat of busyness and money and achievement. And I'm all for setting goals, and I'm all for achieving and creating the life you want to create. But as an artist, I can tell you, I have never been able to create an art piece with someone breathing over me, with someone else imposing their rhythm onto me. I have, and I think back to the nights where suddenly something would switch on inside of me, and I'd be listening to some phenomenal music, and all of a sudden I would start creating, and there was no time. I couldn't stop. I wasn't posting it on Facebook. It was many years ago, right? But I was in that passionate flow. I was in my
Yeah.
rhythm. I was alive and creating, and no one was dictating it to me. I was in tune
Right.
with myself.
Well, and I think that's exactly it, right? That's exactly what makes art, is that it's coming from somewhere deep within the individual. That it's not, when you think about the difference between creating like graphic design for advertisements or marketing, where it's like it's
Right.
artistic, it's creative, but it's not art in the same
It's
way,
not
where
art.
that you're working to bring something deep within out. And like you said, nobody can dictate that to you. Nobody can say, oh, here's what you're supposed to do. And it's not for the sake of supposed to anything. It's
No.
not supposed to do anything other than be art.
And the thing is that, where science has taken something away from us, we know science has added, but where science has taken away is that we're not here to scientifically lead a life where, we're living life like from one hour to the next and compartmentalizing everything. If we want to create a life, it's a creative process, and we need to start thinking of ourselves as artists, and we're actually creating our life. And what do I want? And start to get in touch with your internal rhythms, that spark that's inside of you, that spark that when you die, you take it with you. It's not something which can get captured necessarily in your Instagram photographs. Yes, it can if the passion is so deep that that energy comes forward in your images. But it's not about just taking hundreds of selfies and presenting a mask to the world. It's
You know,
something so authentic and deep within that I feel people need to
I'm
reconnect with.
I'm so happy that we're talking about this right now, because I have to say, as an entrepreneur and somebody who's, wanting to reach people, I feel obligated to be involved in social media and do all this stuff to be seen and, to get the message out. And sometimes it feels like I'm losing my soul, like, oh,
Yeah,
I don't, or playing a game or,
yeah,
just doing something that feels very inauthentic. Yet at the same time, we're supposed to be really authentic in this very inauthentic way of expressing ourselves. And it's just so important to come back to this place of, you know, doing it from that spark that you were talking about. So here's a question for you, Julia. What makes this hard for us? Why is it difficult for us to move in this way?
This is really interesting. It's a phenomenal question. Thank you for asking it, because I hadn't thought about that before. So it's got to do with living from your heart. But I need to really clarify that, because that's been sugar coated, and I want to talk about it. So what's interesting is I was talking about people having lost their own rhythms and listening to another drumbeat, the drumbeat of all these things that you're supposedly supposed to do. The drumbeat you're supposed to listen to is actually your heart, your physical heart. And it's interesting because the physical heart is this massive, from science, a massive generator of energy, but also the heart is a gateway for you to tap into what makes you tick. Here's an interesting thing. Technically, the heart is just a pump. And just like a car, it has an engine. But the car doesn't run because it has an engine. It runs because there's a fuel in the engine, what that then makes that engine work. And similarly, what is that fuel that really keeps the heart alive? You could call it passion. I'm going to call it passion. I'm going to call it a life force energy, and I'm going to call that life force energy passion. And for some reason, our education system, right from the get-go, tries to put people into boxes. They can fit into nice little boxes and, I don't know, study geography
Yeah.
or science or whatever job
Yeah.
they can get. And it has nothing to do with the drumbeat of your heart.
That is so true. And, as a parent, I've got a 15-year-old girl and an 11-year-old boy. And, so they're just in this phase of development where it's like coming into their own and, having more independence. And, it's so interesting to see in the educational system, like you said, how much it is about boxes, stay in this particular trajectory, learn these specific things, demonstrate these particular skills, take this test, get this score, move on to the next thing. And there's nothing there that then teaches, how do you tap into the self? How do you hear? How do you listen? How do you feel what is true and authentic within your own being?
Do you know something that's really interesting? I'll tell you how I found my heart. It's kind of seemingly ironic. But I found it after my father died. And I've spoken about
Yeah.
this a lot to you privately. I've spoken to you a lot about the need for people to understand the true purpose, the true opportunity of death. So maybe we should have the lost art of living and the lost art of dying. I don't
Ooh.
know. Right. But, you know, it's like when someone I loved so deeply left, it created a gateway for me. It actually helped, a gateway in my heart, let me tell you, because that was a heartbreaking experience. And it broke open my heart and helped me to find the correct gateway back to myself. Because my
Wow.
dad would never have wanted me to fit into a box. And the irony is, he was a genius mathematician, and yet I was being pushed by outside forces into science. He would never have done that. And his death cracked open my heart and led me
Wow.
back to the true compass that actually lies inside of your heart. That's the thing. That's the scary part, is that inside of every person's heart there is a compass.
Yeah.
And that compass
Yeah.
will lead you to where you really are going to make the biggest impact in the world. And honestly, I ask this with tears in my eyes, why would your
Yeah.
purpose not bring you abundance? Why would you be given
Right.
gifts and a mission if it wouldn't sustain you? It
Yes.
doesn't make any sense. Why would that be so? And yet, the world tells us no, you need to fit into a box, because only then will you be able to keep a roof over your head. And straight away, we've stopped listening to our own drumbeat.
Exactly. It's so demoralizing and devastating on these levels, right? To say that the truest, most precious part of you, that compass, that heart, that spark, has to be hidden or has to be diminished or has to be locked away, and have you put on these other masks, put on these other ways of being, these other styles of expression, learning these other skill sets in order to be okay and accepted and supported in the world. It's pretty it's it's pretty dire when you think about it that way, and which is why I love so much the modern mystery school work, right? Because it's all about stripping off those layers. It's all about coming back to who we really are.
Yeah.
And I love the emphasis on the sacredness of life, and and in that way of exploring the ancient ways of being, which
Yeah.
is before
Yeah.
we had all of this modern day conundrums about what we're supposed to be doing. And if we didn't have internet, if we didn't have this telecommunication global community, would we have the same sense of, oh, here's what I'm supposed to do? If we weren't watching television or movies and seeing like all these specific ways, I can't help but believe that back in ancient times, when they didn't have this kind of stimulus and input, that it was a much clearer channel to that inner sense of knowing, that inner sense of self.
Well, I actually feel that technology is a gift, but we've taken the same negative stresses that we had prior to technology, and we've literally brought it right back into something good, which I believe is technology, that has now put us right in an even worse position in a way. Because technology, in many ways, it gives us access to information really fast. And the information could be communicating with each other. It could be just knowledge. That knowledge, instead of us, wandering in ignorance for a while, trying to find something we need so that we can listen to our own drumbeat, suddenly we can get that information, not waste as much time, and get back onto that rhythm of who am I really, my rhythm of my heart, following my own passion. Instead, in our disconnect over the last how many, I don't know, millennia or however long that is, instead, we've carried the drumbeat of the world into
Yes.
technology, and we're now slave in a way to
Yes.
technology. So ultimately, no, I don't think technology is the monster. I think we do, however, need to, as you were saying, reach back into the
Yeah.
ancient ways and utilize technology as a tool
Yes.
to expedite our path of discovering who we are. But it is essential. We have to reach back in the past, because in the ancient ways, it's all there. It's mapped. Many
Yeah.
cultures. How many cultures? You and I know we love ancient cultures. We love studying it. I was visiting a really cool, the cult of Mithras on the
I
weekend in
saw
London.
that. I was
So interesting.
so intrigued.
It's just intriguing. I mean, there's just, and then they actually had a reenactment of what it could have been like, and
Wow.
sound and music and the chants, because various different temples have got various, there's data that's been stored of some of the rituals, and they've put it together. And yeah, it was just a reenactment, and it was recorded, and I couldn't video anything. We weren't allowed to, but you know, you can feel that that was one of many approaches to make the everyday sacred. And
Yeah.
so we do need to reach back in the past, and I'm not suggesting we should work with the cult of Mithras, but the point is that knowledge, we have to reach back in the past as simultaneously we reach into the future. And for the first time, we've got the tools of the future plus the magic of the past. Now we can start to
Yeah.
really start living.
Yes, absolutely. I want to go back to, in a moment, this piece, because we really hit on something profound there about, the loss and, that depth of grief really
Yeah.
opening up this gateway,
Yes.
to the sacred. But I think, before we go there, I want to come back to really how we started, which is with this pandemic being, helping us realize what's really important to us. And I think that's the key in coming from a more sacred place for life. How do we rekindle the sacredness of life? And it's a value system, right? We have to make the time, we have
Yeah.
to take the effort. And so, having the things that you need and want to recall that sacredness of life. One thing that I ended up doing during pandemic was I set up an essential oils station. I have so many essential oils. I love essential oils, but I always had them, kind of put away in the drawer and in the bag, and I had them sorted for different purposes, and I used this for that. And then I had a diffuser, and I wasn't using that as much as I thought I would. And I was like, you know what, this is silly. I should be playing with this. So I brought the diffuser out, and I kind of created a whole essential oil station. And I have the sort of candle diffuser, I have the water diffuser, I have my magical oil bath recipes, and all the oils now are continuously engaging with me, and so I'm learning more about them. I'm understanding more about what they do. And it has really brought this sacredness of life to the forefront for me, and in a playful and really supportive way that was so simple. It was just literally a matter of like rearranging things in my room. And it gave me a way to honor myself in taking the time to explore like what oils are going to help me the most in this moment. Like, what do I want to emphasize for myself? How am I feeling? Do I need a boost in this? Do I want to create more of this in my life? Like, how should I use these allies? And then giving them a chance to, give their gifts, which is that, the incredible essence of plant medicine and plant magic. And so, it's such a simple thing, but really for me has opened up a whole new structure in my day-to-day life for honoring the sacredness and bringing back that, that art of living.
Well, of course, you make me think of the family of Ra that were present a long time ago in Egypt, and brought to the mystery schools powerful ceremonies and teachings and understandings of how to live always in each moment in a sacred way, and to honor the energies of forgiveness and kindness and strength, and but to live in this elevated way, and to use things like the oils and self-care and so many things, and you speak about also the plant kingdom, or we have of course also the animal kingdom, and every time we start to take care of all of these different things in our lives, our homes are sacred structures. Whenever we start honoring these things, it actually activates the soul.
Yeah.
And the heart can more easily talk to us when we are activating the soul. And that's really important, because why would this, I started out personally by saying, well, it's the heart, you've got to connect with the heart. But it's people are so disconnected to that because they're living in the very material space. Money is important, money leads, career leads, and the things that you can actually see often lead people's priorities. But it's necessary to keep the soul open in order to hear the
Yeah.
compass of the heart. So all of these things that open up our soul are really important. The arts, animals, plants, essential oils, ceremony. There's just so many things that need to be restored. That we need
You
to
know what it
restore.
reminds me of is, so in the Modern Mystery School, we have a class called the 12 Races of Earth. And we also teach quite a bit in the world of elemental magic. So other beings, other races that are on the planets, the dragons, the unicorns, the ancient civilizations of Atlantis, Lemuria, and Mu. And I remember that one of the first times I heard some of those teachings, and they were talking about these ancient cultures that lived in this very, very sacred way, that everything was ritualized. Everything
Yes.
was, that sort of temple experience. Like that was how the civilization was built. There was a part of my heart, my soul that just cried out because I longed for that experience of what would it be like to have that level of sacredness brought to every aspect of life, into the food and into the communication, into sleep, into sex, into all of these bathing and beautification, like all of it being a sacred process of deep honoring of who we really are, what is our purpose in life, what is the bigger picture about, which are all things that tend not to find their way into our day-to-day kind of mundane reality.
And it's the exact opposite of this constant pushing, this the world's drumbeat that people are allowing themselves to be led by, instead being led by beauty and ceremony and ritual and beautification, and living from that place. It elevates your being, it elevates your mind, and contrary to what your mind might say, you're actually more productive in that state than you
Yes.
are in the rat race. And that's counterintuitive in a way, but it's actually the correct flow because you are operating mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually on a higher vibration, and that will attract better things into your life. And
Yes.
right.
So I'm like, oh my gosh, that I love it. That's like a whole topic in and of itself. I feel like that should be the part two of this
That's
conversation,
part two. That's part two.
is why this way of being is so much more productive, because we don't think it is. We think it's a time suck. We think it's going to take us down to places that aren't going to get us where we want to go or whatever, and those are all fallacies. Those are false beliefs, but we don't have the data in our experience to back it up differently. So yeah, let's definitely dive into that conversation.
Let's dive into that. I'll say one thing that's really interesting. One of the energies from my soul that's a guiding energy for me personally. It's been a very interesting discovery for me because I didn't know this 20 years ago, even 10 years ago. And the thing that really opens up my soul and possibilities for me is beauty. And so the weirdest thing would start happening to me is when I took time. Now, I love beautifying spaces. It's just a thing that I love doing. I was a photographer of interiors for a good 10 years. And so I've always loved architecture and spaces. And yes, my Instagram is ridiculously about spaces, but that's the reason. And I used to sort of like, okay, look, let me go and tidy up those shelves and dust and bring some more flowers here. And I was literally just doing my thing, beautifying, moving some pillows around, getting a new pillow. I would just be pottering and taking sort of half a day just to do this, what would seem to be pretty manual or pretty sort of just, task orientated. I've got to get these things done and make things, shift things around, tidy up, all that. And without thinking, I would do it because it had to be done. I'd be absolutely loving it, actually, at the same time. One of the things I love doing, I know for some people it would be, a horrible task. And all of a sudden, I would get like a bunch of emails, clients looking for me, new clients searching for me. And I'd be like, hang on a second, how did that just happen? How did that just happen? How did I pull that in? Because I was following my heart and following the energy of what my soul needed.
Yes.
And
Yes.
it's I see it, and it surprises me still to this day
Right.
every single time
Right.
because I don't do it with the intention of that happening.
Right. Right. And it's so true. And it's that, I think that sums it up right there. That is the lost art of living,
Exactly,
is the
exactly.
magic that happens when we're in that true authentic space, when we're really being with ourselves. And it's, it feels so tragic to me sometimes that it's so difficult for people to be able to tap that and to get there. Like so many people don't even know. I remember, a number of times I started working with clients and, we would talk about setting intentions or we talk about setting a vision and they'd be like, I don't know what I want. I don't even know how to ask myself what I want. Like that's not something, that we have valued or taught as important, to our kids. It's always been like, no, you need to conform. You need to do what you're told. You need to not rock the boat. I think, the younger generation these days is a little bit better about all that, more boat rocking going on, more connection to self and individualization, but still only to a certain degree. There tends to be
Yeah,
this sort of, it's like a glass ceiling, but around your heart, like a
exactly.
sort of encasement of I can go so far, but then I can't go any further, which is definitely more of what we will address in our part two.
Well,
So,
I know you want to open the floor. I will say one thing. My experience, Vila, has been that people don't know how to give themselves permission.
yeah,
That's the glass ceiling for me. Is they don't know how to give themselves permission to actually do what really makes them happy. I've seen that. So that is definitely part of our part two. And perhaps even a little workshop on how do you follow your heart. So that may be a part three. But yeah.
absolutely. Yes. Okay. So I said I would circle back around to this piece about where loss opens up greater, those gateways that you were talking about, Julia. So I'm curious if you want to say anything more on that piece. Of course, it's
Yes.
a huge topic in and
Yes.
of itself.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I want to tap into something you said earlier about grief. And so the interesting part about grief and following your heart, there is actually a connection, weirdly enough. So I was speaking earlier about following the rhythm of your heart and following your passion, following your life force, following that. The interesting thing is that one of the things we have to be able to do in our heart is be able to grieve. So when we've gone through losses of any kind, it could be moving a country, a city, a town, loss of a family member, a parent, loss of a job, loss of a previous identity. It could, if I think of the refugees now, many different kinds of losses. Some are maybe just going from childhood to adolescence could be seen as a loss. But in the ancient way, in the art of living, we would actually take time to acknowledge and honor the passing of something, the ending of something. And most of the time when people go through a loss, it's the attitude is suck it up, buttercup, put on those big girl panties, and just move on. And grief is this is a wonderful book that I've read. This I'm going to paraphrase. Grief is an essential. It's a highly disruptive force, but it is essential for the growth of man, because when grief comes into our being, it shakes loose old things that we've held onto that we need to completely let go of. And
Yes.
so when we empty our cup, not
Yeah.
of something that's past, that something has come to an end, that same cup that was filled with whatever used to be in it is now empty
Yes.
to receive the next level of passion and new life force. So
Exactly.
passion, living a life alive, is directly connected to allowing the process of grief to be expressed and to be completed. And very important, not just expressed, but completed.
Yeah.
Because I think of my Mediterranean ancestry, Rita, you may have had this, but I think of,
Yeah.
like, we have this culture where when you're in mourning, you wear black and you wear a black veil. Well, I've seen some of these Portuguese aunties wear black veils forever, and certainly some deaths and some losses do take longer. I'm not here to evaluate. There's no time, there's no such thing as it should take X amount or Y amount. But sometimes people just stay in that state of mild grief and they don't even know it. It can come
Yeah.
across as depression or suppressed
Well,
anger, but it's actually unexpressed grief half of the time.
yes. Exactly. And this is precisely where we began, right? With talking about how the pandemic has given us this opportunity to reassess our priorities and shift that rhythm. That's exactly what it was, right? It was this global loss that we all had around life as we knew it. Our ability to go out, our ability to connect with people, even showing up at a job, even all the stuff, extracurricular activities that we might have been doing, our martial arts practices or our yoga practices that, suddenly we couldn't do any of that in the way we used to. And so
Exactly.
that loss and the grieving process that we've all been in and what that has led us to, it really is a passageway to, a deeper understanding of who we really are and what we're really about and what we want, what's correct for us, what matches our fundamental frequency and really lights us up.
Exactly.
Oh, so good.
It's so good.
Okay, Julia, I'm so looking forward to, round 2, 3, 4, 5, 25, 96 of all that we have to talk about.
Bila, I want to really thank you because, first of all, I had so much fun doing it. So thank you so much.
Yay.
Thank you to everyone who arrived. Thank you for everyone for their comments. We wouldn't have been able to open our minds and hearts if it wasn't for your presence. It makes all the world of difference having people jump on board. And it is really a pleasure to just share ideas together. For me, it's an absolute joy. So thank you, Vila, for creating this.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for being here and all of your amazing insights.
So you can find Julia on her website, juliatiffin.com. You can also find her on Facebook and Instagram. She puts out amazing content there and is just all around a wonderful inspiration as a guide and teacher. I want to thank all of you so much for listening. Please come back for more installments of Live Your Light, the Inner Radiance Academy podcast. You can also join us on Clubhouse. Inner Radiance Academy is there, and we do rooms on Clubhouse once or twice a week. I'm Vila Lucas. Thank you so much for listening.